Cool. So, I'm looking at my notes right here, making sure that I got this covered. I'm going to be talking about understanding yourself, the process of understanding yourself. Man, that is self-discovery is I mean there there are so many books, so many videos, so many works of art that all pertain to self-discovery. I mean, it's a big aspect of philosophy, it's a big aspect of just everything because knowing yourself, know thyself, that is such a huge component of our culture. And everybody has different answers, and I don't see any of my answer necessarily being wrong, but it's always tricky to pertain those answers to every individual because everyone is so different, right? So the idea of self-discovery by in itself is really about figuring out who you are, who you as one person, with your ideas, your past, your environment, your parents, your knowledge, everything, right? Everything that kind of makes you you. How does it work? How do you figure yourself out? And some people are very good at this, some people have difficulty with it. For me, I have had nothing but problems with trying to figure myself out because there are so many layers that I have become aware of over the course of years that have built upon each other, kind of like stacking like a brick, right? Building a foundation and kind of building more and more. And the problem that occurs is when you don't understand just how complex of a system you might have made unconsciously about who you are, if you don't understand how tough it is, it's very easy to keep making mistakes. In regards to what I mean by that is uncovering one layer and thinking that's it. And that's kind of been an issue that I had dealt with for give or take like 7 or 8 years. I'm not going to go into in depth about myself in this. This is not about me as a person. This is more about kind of the thought process that I came onto. But basically, I realized over the course of so many years that there were just so many layers that were built on who I was in both good and bad terms, right? And while I'm someone who believes in the gray more than black and white, it's easier to classify with black and white than gray. So for now, I'm kind of going with good and bad. But there's, of course, various shades of that. And in that, breaking through these layers, I realized little and little details that would kind of be connected to the next thing. So I would have a thought, for example, one of the things I dealt with was having an all or nothing mentality, which becomes an obsession at times, which is where I can look at something that excited me and I can delve in it 100%. But the problem is the moment something doesn't work the way I want it to, I drop it immediately, right? And it's the same case with so many things in my life. That I used to think that was the ultimate layer of why I was not doing certain things I was supposed to. Because when I would uncover like, okay, why am I not doing writing every day? I would uncover that layer and then I'll be like, all or nothing, because I was consistently writing for these many days, but then suddenly something came out of the blue and I lost track and now I can't. So the all or nothing behavior, basically. I need to be focused 100% to achieve my goals. If I don't, it goes to shit. And this is my example. That's because I didn't, and the thing is, with that mentality, I thought that was the answer. And that's kind of the biggest issue that occurs with, in my opinion, on self-discovery, where we think that we peeled back enough layers, now we know who we really are. But I think there is so many more. And a good way to look at your self-discovery, of trying to figure out who you are, why do you think the way you think, and why do you prefer certain things, what are your biases, all of that stuff. The good way to look at it is really always assume that whatever you found out is just the surface. Every time you think that you've gone deeper, just, in my opinion, it's okay to assume that there's something below. And I haven't found like the deepest aspect. Now, there are certain feelings that I do think come out of the deepest aspects, but I haven't found the deepest level. But I think I'm getting closer and closer, and I think that's what self-discovery is, just peeling back layers, because these layers are kind of honestly just unconsciously built over the course of life to just survive, right? Survive in our society, survive high school, survive college, survive so many things. These different layers, and I don't think these layers are bad. They're important. They help us manage in this crazy world, but we lose certain aspects of why we do what we do, what we want to do, why don't we achieve what we want to achieve. All of these like deeper questions can't come from those surface layers. They have to go deeper. So one thing I would say, first tip, self-discovery, always assume there's more layers than what you think there are. Now, if you go with that route, what's the next part of self-discovery? Well, how do you uncover these layers? Oh man, that's another tricky thing to figure out, because I think for everyone it's different, right? For some it's intake of knowledge. For some it might be experience, go out and experience something. For some it might go out and create something. For some it might be go out, or don't go out, sorry. So create something in like at home, or it might be deep introspection of constantly think about your thought process. Some could be like journal. Some could be look at some sort of a kind of compare and contrast between someone else and kind of come to a conclusion through that, kind of a research type of mindset and experimentation even. All of these are good ideas, and I will not give any specific ones that I think will work, because again, it's such a wide principle, it's such a wide concept, it's very, very important, but there is not one answer that will work for all of you. For me, definitely journaling helped. But I think that's because I've always been a thinking sort of a person. I always have so many thoughts, and the problem is when you have too many thoughts, you can't keep track of them. You can't keep track of where this thought kind of came from. What does it mean, other than the initial feeling that it might give you and what it was about. So for me, journaling it out, writing it down, kind of exposing out these thoughts started to essentially make it so that I stopped having so many thoughts in the consistent day-by-day basis, because I'm always bringing them out. And when I started doing that, the next layer of thoughts that I would get were more and more deeper, and usually more simpler. That's one caveat I can give you. As you go deeper in layers, I feel like the complexity actually is not as complex, as deep, whatever the way you want to call it. It's not as complex as you think. It starts becoming more and more simple as you start breaking it down bit by bit, taking down the layers. You'll find that the reasoning is much more simple than initially what you thought, and I think the layers make it more complex. And so whenever you feel like your thoughts are getting more simple, with however your process is, so this is tip number 2, however your process is to take out those layers, when you start finding the reasons of whatever the next layer is of why you do what you do, and it seems more simpler, you're on the right track. Because usually it will come down to something that can be said in a sentence, at least as far as I've gotten. For me, a big aspect of a lot of this was fear. Fear was a big detriment for my all-nothing mentality. At least that's what I figured out from my thought process and me breaking it down and me trying to discover who I am. Fear was a big aspect, and fear of both failure, lack of achievement, but also fear of success has been a big issue into why I've gotten to the second layer, which I thought was the all or nothing behavior. Fear was the next one, and the fear of those two things, which were much more simpler, and then there was a layer B, underneath that, and there's more layers underneath that, so it keeps going downwards. The self-discovery, I really feel like it's just an aspect of peeling layers one after another to whatever process you want, and you're on the right track when the answer seems more and more simple. And that's a very interesting and a tricky thing that our mind does, because when the answer seems more simple, we're less likely to believe it, right? Because it can't be that simple. Your initial reaction of your life, right, when you're in a certain path and saying that, oh, it's because of this, you just feel like, no, it can't be that. The answer to so many issues or so many things that I might be dealing with, or so many things I want to understand about myself, comes from such a simple place. Seems very counterintuitive, but that's the whole point. That's why it's so easy to miss, because we don't want to look at simplicity. We want to look at more complexity, because complex gives us this, in a way, this false confidence that we as individuals couldn't figure this out because it was so tough, right? And it is tough, but it's tough in the sense of accepting our own hubris in a way, of that maybe we're not as complex as we think at moments, and maybe some issues that we have come from a less complex stance. So those would be my main ways to kind of look at self-discovery. Now, the third thing, this is my third tip, because again, I wanted to keep it I'm not trying to give specific means, but more kind of what you're looking for. The third thing is, when you find a deeper layer, spend some time on it. I would really suggest it. Spend some time on trying to figure out why this is, and you might even find the answer to the next one, and you might want to just jump out of that layer to the next one, right? Because we want to find the answer quick, but again, that can become a false herring. You might think that you figured this layer out and now it's time to go to the next one, but you might not have. There might be something still that you need to figure out, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to really delve into these deeper layers of why you do what you do, because the positives, there's definitely a great positive of why you do what you do, but we as humans always will look at negatives more, because I'm an optimist, but at the same time, the reason why we naturally look at it more is because that's how we deal with situations. We want to stop the bad, not as much as we want to make the good, even though I think making the good is way better. A lot of times we look at it in the mentality of stop the bad, and if that is the case, might as well really feel it through the layer. For me, because the fears were such a big aspect, I really delved into it, right? And to me, once I really delved into it and I really kind of understood why I feel these things and what it means, I realized that now I felt more positive about them. Now the fears are not, they're still there. They're not gone, obviously, but they're there kind of showing me, hey, you're on the right track. If you're feeling these things, you're kind of on the right track. You know, if you're doing something that makes you afraid, you're on the right track. So that is just, it's a positive note ultimately, and it can't happen until you spend some time on each of those layers. So once you find the next one, take some time. Whether it's journaling, whether it's experience, whether it's talking about it, whatever the case may be, spend some time in that layer and figure it out, feel it out, and kind of, when you feel like you have gotten imagine every inch of that floor, you feel like you really have felt it all through, then you're ready for the next one, right? But till then, spend some time on it, and I think it will really help. And so ultimately, those are the three main tips, right? First is, always, whenever you look at these layers, always imagine there's more. Always assume there might be more than you think. Second is, you will feel like the answer is too simple, and most likely that's the right way to look at it. If you feel like the answer is simple, you're on the right track. And lastly, the third tip is to spend some time on that specific layer that you uncover. Spend some time on it. Don't try to go to the next one. Don't think of it as a race. You know, this self-discovery is something we spend our whole lives doing, but ultimately it does help push us more to do great things. So hopefully these three little tips helped you out. Again, there's so many ways to look at this. There's so many ways to figure it out. There's so many great books. There's so many things that I've read that kind of have given me some insight, but ultimately you'll find your method. That's why I can't recommend a method. I can't say go start journaling. I can't say start going out there and doing stuff. All of these are great advice. All of these are great tools to implement. Try them all out, I would say, actually. If I was to say anything, I'll say try each one of those things out and see how you feel at the end of the day. But ultimately, it's not really about the method you choose. It's really about what you're trying to achieve. And self-discovery, for me, has been uncovering why, little by little, of who I am. And yeah, take care.